May 1945, the guns fell silent across Europe. Cities smoldered, surrender papers signed, flags lowered. For the Allied powers, it was victory. For Germany, defeat. Yet within the wreckage of the Third Reich, something quieter unfolded, something most would never see. Scattered across command bunkers, submarines, and field headquarters were the encrypted lifelines of the Nazi war machine, Enigma machines. Devices once guarded with lethal secrecy were now abandoned, broken, or hurriedly destroyed. In many cases, they were left intact. Allied soldiers entering German positions reported strange contraptions, wooden boxes filled with rotors, wires, and dials. Most had no idea what they were, but the few who did understood immediately. These weren't just battlefield spoils. They were keys to secrets still hidden. In some areas, German forces had followed final orders to destroy their Enigmas. They smashed them with rifle butts, burned code books, or tossed the machines into lakes and rivers. But in the confusion of collapse, others simply fled, leaving the devices behind. In the days after the surrender, special Allied intelligence teams, many attached to signals units, moved quickly. They weren't after tanks or weapons. They were after these boxes. The Enigmas that survived were quietly gathered, crated, and shipped away not to museums, but to vaults. Their war was over, but their story was not. One fact is certain. The silence surrounding Enigma's fate began not with war, but with peace. Before it became a symbol of wartime secrecy, the Enigma machine began as a commercial invention. In 1918, German engineer Arthur Scherbius patented a device he believed could revolutionize secure communications. It was called Enigma, a name meaning mystery. Initially, it drew little attention. Scherbius marketed it to banks and businesses, but in the early 1922, the German Navy took interest. By 1926, the military had adopted its own modified version. Over the next decade, the Wehrmacht and Luftwaffe followed, integrating Enigma into their command structures. At its core, the machine used a system of rotating disks or rotors to scramble letters into complex, ever-changing codes. Each day, every Enigma operator worldwide was assigned a new set of rotor positions, plug board settings, and key combinations. This made millions of potential encryptions all unreadable without the exact setup. German high command believed the machine was unbreakable, and for years, it was. Field messages, battle plans, and naval routes passed through Enigma's dials. It became the nervous system of Nazi military communication. But behind the scenes, a multinational effort had already begun to pry open its secrets. In the early 1930 seconds, Polish mathematicians Marian Rejewski, Jerzy Rajicki, and Henryk Zagałki made critical breakthroughs. They shared their findings with British intelligence in 1939. This laid the groundwork for what would become Bletchley Park, the Allied cryptography center that would ultimately break Enigma. By 1945, the machine was no longer invincible, but most German forces didn't know that. To them, Enigma still offered security. As the war ended, thousands of these devices were still in use, guarding secrets that outlived the Reich itself. In the final weeks of April 1945, Nazi Germany unraveled with stunning speed. Soviet troops breached Berlin's defenses. American and British forces swept through Western Germany. From the Führer bunker to isolated outposts, the Reich's chain of command disintegrated. On 1 May, Hitler was dead by suicide. His inner circle scattered. Orders from what remained of German high command were vague, contradictory, and often ignored. Among those urgent directives, one stood out: destroy all cryptographic material. Across collapsing fronts, German soldiers burned code books and smashed Enigma machines. Some units, especially within the Kriegsmarine, followed this order meticulously. They dumped devices into lakes or deep inside submarines before scuttling. The intent was clear: deny their use to the Allies at all costs. But the chaos of retreat and surrender didn't leave time for precision. In abandoned headquarters and makeshift bunkers, Enigmas were left behind, sometimes intact, sometimes partially dismantled. In a few rare cases, they were simply forgotten. One significant example came from a captured U-boat, U-505, intercepted off the coast of West Africa. Inside, American forces found an Enigma machine and codebooks that proved invaluable. That machine now rests in a Chicago museum, a symbol of both technological prowess and wartime secrecy. Elsewhere, Allied units stumbled upon crates filled with unmarked machines. The devices looked unremarkable to most wooden boxes with unfamiliar controls. But to trained eyes, they represented a potential intelligence windfall. The war had ended in flames and fragments. Yet among the ruins, the quiet survival of some enigmas hinted at a second life, not on the battlefield, but in the back rooms of intelligence agencies. In the months following Germany's surrender, Allied forces wasted no time exploiting what the war had left behind. Among the most closely guarded recoveries were the Enigma machines, dozens, perhaps hundreds of them captured from abandoned posts, sunken submarines, and surrendered units. British and American intelligence quickly categorized these machines as strategic assets. While the public celebrated peace, a new race began behind closed doors. At the center of it was a simple but powerful idea. The world didn't yet know that Enigma had been broken. The British government, under strict post-war secrecy policies, ensured that the success of Bletchley Park remained hidden. Few, even within the military, understood how much Enigma traffic had been read during the war. To maintain this advantage, officials made a bold choice. Rather than destroy the captured machines, they began quietly redistributing them. Throughout 1946 and 1947, Enigma machines were sent to British Commonwealth nations, former colonies, and smaller Allied states. The message was clear. These were valuable encryption tools, trusted by Germany and still effective. What wasn't shared was that the British could still read any message encrypted with them. This move extended the life of Enigma as a silent weapon. While former allies used them for diplomatic and military communication, British cryptographers monitored traffic through already broken protocols. Across the Atlantic, American cryptologic units under the newly formed NSA pursued similar aims. Machines captured from German sources were used to train a new generation of analysts, even as the Cold War took shape. The guns had gone silent, but the machines kept working. Only now, they served different masters. Behind the scenes of early post-war diplomacy, a second intelligence war was already underway, one not fought with armies, but with intercepts, silence, and deception. The Enigma machine, thought by many to be obsolete, was now a hidden instrument of global surveillance. Between 1947 and the early 1952, British intelligence expanded its quiet campaign. Dozens of countries, particularly in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, received surplus Enigma machines presented as gifts or sold at low cost. These nations, unaware of the machine's compromised design, began using them for sensitive communications. For Britain, it was the perfect trap. Through a program directed by GCHQ, traffic from these machines was intercepted, deciphered, and analyzed. What had once been Germany's strongest cipher was now a colonial listening post. American intelligence, observing these developments, followed a parallel path. Files declassified decades later reveal how U.S. cryptologists, many trained under Operation TICOM, examined, captured German encryption techniques, and built upon them. Some Enigma derivatives even appeared in early Cold War exercises. The French government, however, reportedly protested. They had also acquired Enigma devices and were not informed of their vulnerability. Tensions arose as French diplomats accused British agencies of intentionally withholding cryptographic truths. For both GCHQ and the NSA, secrecy remained paramount. Even as the Cold War escalated, neither agency publicly acknowledged that Enigma had been broken during the Second World War. Not until 1974 would that secret begin to unravel. Until then, Enigma remained more than a relic. It was a trapdoor into other nations' secrets, cloaked in the confidence of false security. As the decades passed, the fates of the Enigma machines began to diverge. No longer weapons of war, tools of espionage, they slipped into obscurity or into the hands of collectors, museums, and history's forgotten corners. Some were preserved intentionally. British and American intelligence agencies retained several models for training and archival study. At Bletchley Park, a few surviving machines were stored under lock and key long before the site became a public museum. Others were less fortunate. In surplus warehouses across Europe, unwanted Enigmas were listed as obsolete equipment and quietly sold, discarded, or even destroyed. A number found their way into university laboratories or were repurposed as educational tools. By the 1960 and 1970 seconds, A niche but growing collector market began to form. Retired intelligence officers, military surplus dealers, and code-breaking enthusiasts started trading these machines. Prices were modest at first. One British university reportedly sold a working Enigma for the equivalent of $20. Still others resurfaced in unlikely places. Machines were found in Poland, Finland, and even Egypt, some rusting in military stockpiles, others tucked away in government offices. In 2011, a diver exploring a Baltic wreck discovered an Enigma machine still sealed in its U-boat case, heavily corroded but unmistakable. Not all were real. The growing popularity of wartime artifacts led to a flood of replicas and partial reconstructions. Authenticity became a challenge as demand outpaced supply. But the true enigmas, the ones that had whispered the secrets of a world at war, continued to emerge, quietly, unpredictably, like messages delayed in transmission. For decades after the war, the Enigma story remained a state secret. Those who had broken it kept silent under government orders. The public, and even many veterans, believed the machine had never been cracked. That illusion endured until a single book shattered it. In 1974, former Royal Air Force officer F.W. Winterbotham published The Ultra Secret. For the first time, it revealed that British intelligence had broken Enigma and had done so for most of the war. The book ignited a wave of fascination, disbelief, and controversy. The revelations forced official recognition. Governments began to declassify long-sealed records. Bletchley Park, once a nondescript estate in Buckinghamshire, was unveiled as the nerve center of one of the war's most consequential secrets. Debate followed. Could the war have lasted longer without ultra-intelligence? How many lives had been saved? Some historians credited the Enigma breakthrough with shortening the conflict by 2 years. Others urged caution, noting the fog of war and the limits of hindsight. Legal and ethical questions also surfaced. Why had so many post-war governments been allowed to use Enigma machines without knowing they were compromised? Were diplomatic decisions made under false pretenses? By the 1,980 seconds and 1,990 seconds, Enigma had become a symbol of ingenuity, of secrecy, and of the strange moral terrain between war and peace. Bletchley Park was restored and opened to the public. Veterans gave long-delayed interviews. The shadow lifted, but not entirely, because even in full light, Enigma remained enigmatic. Its legacy was not just in what it hid, but in how long it stayed hidden. In the quiet of post-war exile, Marian Rejewski sat down to write. The Polish mathematician had once helped pierce the veil of Germany's prized cipher machine years before Britain's Bletchley Park took up the challenge. But for decades, few knew his name. Back in the early 1,930 seconds, Rejewski and his colleagues Jerzy Rojicki and Henryk Zygalski at the Polish Cipher Bureau had reconstructed how the Enigma worked. Using mathematics, logic, and a captured manual, they decrypted early German transmissions and built replica machines. In 1939, as the threat of war loomed, they handed their findings to British and French intelligence. It was, in essence, the key. After Poland fell to Nazi forces, Rejewski fled. He continued cryptographic work in France and later in Britain, but his early contributions were lost to classified shadows. He returned to Poland in the late 1,940 seconds under communist rule, stripped of recognition, living a modest life as an accountant. It wasn't until the 1,970 seconds that his role began to surface. Slowly, Western historians and Polish officials began to piece together the timeline and realize just how crucial Rejewski's work had been. He gave interviews, published memoirs, and received belated honors from NATO nations. Still, his story remained lesser known, eclipsed by the grandeur of Bletchley Park. Rejewski died in 1980, just as a new generation began to understand the scale of what had been done in secret. His life, like the machine he once unraveled, had moved in silence. Today, the Enigma machine sits behind glass in museums and private collections. Its polished keys and wooden frame tell part of a story, a tale of war, secrecy, and intelligence. But for all that has been uncovered, much remains in shadow. What is certain is this: hundreds of Enigma machines survived the war. Some were seized, others were sold. A few were simply forgotten. Their trails stretch from the depths of the Atlantic to dusty storerooms in former colonies. Some ended up in schools, misidentified as educational tools. Others were dismantled or lost entirely. We know that Allied agencies used the machines long after 1945, often without disclosing their vulnerabilities. We know the silence around Bletchley Park was deliberate and absolute, enforced, not for years, but for decades. And we know that when the truth came out, it changed how the war was remembered. Yet, questions linger. How many machines were destroyed that could have offered insight into German command structures? What intelligence was gathered from post-war Enigma traffic and at what cost? Which stories were buried alongside the devices themselves? Enigma's legacy is more than mechanical. It represents the tension between knowledge and secrecy, between technological triumph and historical omission. It is a symbol not just of encryption, but of how much we choose to reveal. One fact is certain: the machine built to hide secrets has become one of the greatest secrets of the 20th century. The truth remains: not everything was decrypted.